Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. I know it's like when we start out this seminar slash marathon, it appears that it's overwhelming. And, the Monday when we start out, it seems daunting. But here we are, Saturday, and I just can't believe how fast we've moved through the week in retrospect. And this morning, we're in for a treat on this final day of this seminar. Usually, our Saturday session tends to be sort of like a framing and closing. And we have two outstanding panelists this morning to really frame for us this entire week of the third annual Georgia Danis seminar, which is done in association with our partners, the Karamanlis here at the Fletcher School, the Institute of International Relations in Greece, IDIS, and the American College of Greece in Diri, and the Global Affairs Institute. And we have throughout this week looked at this issue of resurgent, in quotations, nationalism and revisionism in the dynamic Eastern Mediterranean in a way that, sort of like to frame our conversation more than anything else. And we started out the week by looking at the issue of nationalism in itself by, two academics here in the U.S., Haris Middlenas in Washington, D.C., and Elizabeth Prodromou over here in Boston. And they gave us a framing, and it was actually Professor Middlenas who put the quotations around our title and talked about how identity in some ways has been nationalistically framed in this part of the world. And it's not necessarily resurgent, but it's something that keeps coming back, and it's recurrent more than resurgent. So, we just left it and discussed it throughout the week. And then on Tuesday and Wednesday, we went to the different parts of the Mediterranean and looked at some of what's going on in these parts of the Mediterranean by looking at the conundrum of Cyprus from a Cypriot perspective, and looked at what the situation in Turkey by Aykan Erdemir, and, the whole idea of, this 3+1 and the spillovers, the possible spillovers within, of Turkish foreign policy, raising that question of how that's going to be played out. And on Wednesday, the things that highlight the Wednesday was, the panel on the Balkans and the discussion on Libya, looking at other parts of what we consider to be this Mediterranean basin. And of course, we did have a discussion with Ambassador Aviram and his interests versus values, which was also very interesting as far as what's going on in Israel right now and what's going on in other parts of the region, including conversations as far as American foreign policy and how interest and values is it oriented. Is it about the geopolitical framing, or is it about this whole idea of democratic values? And they don't necessarily have a Democrat or Republican frame to it. It's just a matter of interest versus values. And even somebody like Rami Khouri yesterday was discussing the notion of, what we have to accept this interest over value sometimes, even when we're looking at what's going on with the Palestinians, even what's going on in the possible reframing and revision of state borders in the region, the de facto state borders, changing of state borders in places like Syria over the last few years, or even Ukraine. So the sort of like the elephant in the room, as I called it, I think at some point this week, the issue of, Russia and aggression and Russia invasion, as, Professor Triadafilu tried to reframe that a little bit for us yesterday and say that it can't be an invasion because, they weren't successful, the Russians, thus far, and maybe it's an aggression, but regardless, we have this trend. And I'm saying all this to frame our conversation this morning, with, two, very good and very knowledgeable people of the region from very different perspectives, in discipline and otherwise, political science versus anthropology versus sociology. We pay a lot of attention to that here on this side of the Atlantic. But Professor Roussos has written on revolutions recently in the Middle East, and we're very, very happy to have Sotiris, who has been not only a colleague, but I'd say a friend and a longtime collaborator in what we're trying to do at the Institute of Eastern Mediterranean Studies, not only through this, but actually he has come to Crete and over the summer, and he's done this repeatedly, and we're very, very grateful for his support and I'd say partnership up to now. I mean, I think if this was a law firm,
That's sure. That's for sure. That's for sure.
he'd be a partner by now. But thankfully, it's not a law firm, and it's and it's an academic structure. So he'll present on revolution and resurgence in the Middle East, and of course we have a new acquaintance to myself. Somebody who works at the American College of Greece, a sociologist, anthropologist, a political scientist, as we found out, Dr. Ilay Romain Ors, who's originally from Istanbul but is in Athens, which also provides this great two sides of the Aegean kind of framing, and she's going to discuss the impact of 2023 earthquake diplomacy. This is so recent, the last couple of weeks, and the tragedy that's still unfolding there. I mean, I know we haven't talked about it that much this week, and it's not in the news that much, but there's still people covered under rubble in Syria and Turkey, and the extent of that. So I think we're in for a treat this morning, this afternoon in Athens, and in Nicosia, in Beirut, in Alexandria, or Istanbul, wherever you happen to be, or Belgrade. So I yield the floor to Sotiris first, and then Ilay next for their presentation. Thank you very much.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I know that it's early in the morning now in Boston, and I would like first of all to thank Petros and the Institute of East Mediterranean for this invitation. It's not only an honoring invitation for me, but also a challenging invitation, because it's very challenging to be with all these experts around you, and you have to present something really innovative, or at least important to these audiences. Now, without further ado, I would like to present my today's talk, saying that it's a mixture of politics and history, political science and history, or international relations and history. What it is the products of my long time research on revolutions in the Middle East. And I started this kind of study or research by thinking that we can have a new periodization in the Middle East, in the Middle East history and Middle East politics, which can be based on revolts and revolutions. We are accustomed, we are used to have periodization of the modern history of the Middle East and of the current affairs based on Cold War geopolitics, on the Arab-Israeli conflict, or even what they called actually in the 60s and 70s the Arab Cold War between the so-called radical and the conservative states at that time. Now, what I propose right from the beginning is a periodization based on three main events or revolts. The first period begins with the Great Arab Revolt of 1936, which is the less known of these revolutionary events, because I believe that this Great Arab Revolt was actually triggered, actually was the reason that triggered the whole Arab-Israeli conflict as we know it after the 1948. The second is the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979. I think this is accepted by most of the experts that the Islamic Revolution changed geopolitics in the Middle East and also regional balances in the Middle East. And the last but not least is the Arab uprisings of 2011 because I believe that with these uprisings, we have a further demise of what we have seen as the Arab modern state. In, if we see the cases of Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and Libya, we are talking about very strong states. Nobody would question the strength of these states, both domestic, both the domestic arena and the international arena, particularly Syria, Iraq, and Libya. But we have seen the demise of these states, and also we have seen that these uprisings have certain waves. They are coming with waves. First was Syria, uh, um, Libya, then we have Yemen at the same time. But also, after some years, we had also uprisings in Algeria. We have, of course, we have Tunisia in the first place, and also in other places that went a bit without many comments and without many interest or from much interest from the media, which is the uprisings in Lebanon in 2000, from 2019 onwards, 2020, and the uprisings in other places of the Middle East. Now, what is the underpinning principle of this new periodization? And this is actually the hypothesis of the book that I produced last autumn. It's that the impact of revolutionary situations on regional developments is as important as the influence of the international system on the region, if not important at the time. So what I'm trying to, and also it is useful at this point to make some more, let's say, talk about what do we mean by revolution and how we see the revolutions in general in the case of the international relations. First of all, what we term as revolution is a mass mobilization that attempts the rapid and violent overthrow of the existing regime and economical, social, and symbolic hierarchy. Actually, with this, this term or this terminology in order to understand what a revolution is, because there are so many different, let's say, terms about and explanations about what the revolution is. And the other thing is that we very much appreciate it, and we base our views on what Fred Halliday had said about the revolution and insurgencies. He said that revolutions and insurgencies are like volcanic eruptions and earthquake. Now we have earthquakes in the Middle East. I don't know whether we will have revolutions as well. So revolution occurs in a particular place, but highlights structures and tectonic movements over a much larger area beneath the Earth's surface. The same happened with revolutions. So, and how we approach these revolutions and revolts, because we use what we call an intersocietal approach. It's an approach actually proposed by George Lawson, and we are going to examine people, networks, ideas, institutions, and states that have imitated, coerced, borrowed, and appropriated elements from each other. And also these multiple spaces influence the birth and evolution or evolutions at international order in an inherently anarchic international system. So it will, this is an interdisciplinary approach, bringing together theory of political violence and revolutions, international relations theory, and kind of sociology to a certain extent. Now, coming to our case studies, we will say that major uprisings, revolutions, played a central role in shaping the two major international conflicts in the region, the Arab-Israeli conflict and the competition between Iran and the US and their allies. Let's say a little bit about each of them, and so what we have with the Arab revolt of 1936, it's a revolt against the British mandate. It's a revolt that started, and the reasons for this revolt were five. It says it was the land bank by Zionists in the mandate period, 1922, 1947, 45, I would say, that this land bank by Zionists means that evicting Palestinian farmers from the land they have been farming for centuries. Also, there was land confiscation due to large debts of Palestinian farmers. Also, the moving of farmers, the internal migration of farmers to urban centers for unskilled work on unequal terms. Also, the very important thing, the questioning of the ability of the notables of the Arab notable strategy to protect the Palestinian land, and land sales also by the same landowners, notables, to the Zionist project, to the project of Jewish settlement in Palestine and the creation of the Jewish national home according to the mandate and the Balfour Declaration. Now, what this revolt, how this revolt started, or at least was created. First of all, it links the class struggle of Palestinian peasants and farmers to the struggle for independence for the first time. It declares the armed struggle and challenging the strategy of gradual approach of the notables. Then the farmers link the struggle for their land with independence. And also we have Islam, political Islam, which was different from the traditional Islam, which connected the farmers with strata of educated young people in the cities. This was the background of the revolt. The revolt started from 1936 to 1939. It has an art character, particularly from 1937 to 1939. And actually, it finished with the final defeat of the insurrection by the British. Now, why it is so important? Why we connect this with the Arab-Israeli conflict? First, because there was a political identification of the wide strata of educated young people in the Arab countries at that time, the so-called Efendiyya, with the uprising in Palestine. They saw it as a symbolic struggle for their own independence. Also, the Arab revolt gave the opportunity to Muslim Brotherhood, particularly in Egypt, to change its character from a religious to a political organization. And also, last but not least, it linked the Palestinian struggle with the political legitimacy of the regimes in the Arab capitals, in the Arab states. The stance of the established parties in the Arab capitals on the Palestinian issue was a key criterion for their political legitimacy. And actually, very many people say that the 1948 Arab-Israeli war was the last hope of the ruling Arab elites to survive, to get the political legitimacy they want. That's why they connect, let's say, it connected the uprising, the Arab uprising of the Arab revolt of 1936 with the Arab-Israeli conflict. Many people say that if there was no the Arab uprising, the Arab revolt of 1936, the Arab states would not take part in the, would not be obliged or feel obliged to take part in the Palestinian struggle, and the whole issue would not be the same as it was in 1947-48. Now, turning to the Islamic revolution in Iran, the situation is we have three milestones we have to bear in mind in the history of the Iranian, the modern history of Iran, in the history of Iran in 20th century. And these three milestone events was first, the constitutional revolution in 1906. Second, the Mossadegh overthrowing or the coup d'etat against the Mossadegh in 1953, and the Islamic Revolution, of course. Why we say so? Because we have two kind of traumas in the case of the Iranian politics throughout the 20th century. The first was that the foreign powers, be it Russia, Tsarist Russia, or Great Britain, or the USA then, and Britain again, did not allow the country to have, in a way, exploit its resources for the benefit of the Iranian people. And this is something that has started even from the 1906 constitutional revolt. The second is that the constitution, which was enacted in 1906, has been in a way abolished, or at least they have not allowed other Iranians to enjoy the constitution, and this was a very important thing for that means that they are not allowed the will of the people to govern the country. So the will of the people and the exploitation of the resources. So the whole struggle in Iran revolved around these two issues in the whole 20th century. The other things that are related to this is that actually there are new strata coming up, particularly the Shah period in the 1960s and 1970s. And these were the large migration from the agricultural areas to the cities, particularly Tehran. And we have a lot of people coming to the and living in slums around Tehran. They seek, actually, they have they sought at that time to have a better life in the cities, and actually they were very disappointed. At the same time, the Shah has, in a way, tried to have an authoritarian reform from above, with agrarian reform, with industrial development, with state subsidies and concessions to foreign companies. Actually, that's why we have a very large wave of internal migration from the countryside to the big cities. Now, particularly in the 1970s, late 1960s, 1970s, we have a height in political authoritarianism, particularly after the overthrow of Mossadegh, and the brutal repression of all opposition. Now, the Shah could, in a way, face all the opposition because of the booming in the oil industry and the income from oil. But after 1974, with the global economic crisis, uh, there was inflation, declining production, and impoverishment of internal migrants in the slums. So this created a lot. And what we had actually, it was a coalition, a social coalition between the uh, the internal migrants, those who in the slums, with the bazaar merchants, which have been actually marginalized by foreign companies, foreign trade, and with the educated youth who was suppressed by the Shah. And these were actually um, the forces behind that forces that came to support Ayatollah Khomeini's movement, who actually, in that sense, united all the opposition, be it Marxist or Islamist. Now, what was uh, the international impact of this? For for Khomeini and for the Islamists, the whole international arena was a Manichaean battle between what they call Mustasafans, the oppressed, and the Mustakbarans, the oppressors. And that was the basis for Iran's behavior at the regional and the global level. Also, the Iraq War, where Iraq was supported by literally all other powers, US, Soviet Union, France, uh, Saudi Arabia, in that sense, came to confirm this position that Iran was the representative of the oppressed, the fighter for the oppressed, and all the others were the oppressors. And also, this created the let's say the view that the survival of a revolution means that the revolution should be exported. So during the war period, the Iranian war, Iran formed a network of Shiite organizations and friendly Sunni organizations in Lebanon, Iraq, Palestine, and the Arabian Peninsula, and forged a close alliance with Syria. Also, the Iranian revolution shifted the axis of global interests from the Arab-Israeli conflict to Mesopotamia and the Persian Gulf. There was a new chapter in international politics where alliances of states and non-state actors will play a leading role. Now, coming to and I'm finishing with this, coming to the Arab uprisings, I would say that of 2011, I would say that it's a phenomenon still in progress. That's why I didn't cover it in my book. Still in progress because we have seen waves of this uprising still coming in different shapes and with different demands and claims, but has not they're not stopped. What these uprisings did questioned a very long, let's say, certainties about the Arab states, particularly the Arab state that was created in the 60s in Syria, Iraq, Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, and Yemen. And also, some people say that in some cases it brought these states back to the tribal, let's say, configurations of politics, which is not actually the case. Also, the term tribal is very controversial, I would say. It's sometimes not very enlightening in that sense, but certainly it took these states and these societies away from what we have the division line between, let's say, radical, that is the Baathist or the Arab, the Pan-Arabist, and the conservatives, which is where the Saudis or the UAE. So it's or and the kingdoms of Jordan and Morocco. So we are now in a situation that I think we are in a transitional situation. Um, I'm of the opinion that um, the we have not seen the end game of the uprisings of 2011. Uh, we have seen the end game in Syria, Iraq, or other places, and thus we have to uh, stay and we have to continue work with revolutions and revolt in the Middle East in order to understand the situation in front of us. Thank you very much for your attendance.
I think it's a great sort of like transition, especially with the last points that Sotiris made as far as the in progress kind of a thing, because it's sort of like the in progress has to do also with uh, governability and and discontent and reaction of government. And I think our next speaker is going to speak on a recent phenomena that we have just at the beginning of February has changed the environment and has raised those questions as far as the ongoing revolution or the ongoing unrest or the ongoing lack of governance or in the progress of governance. So it's a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Ilay Romain Ors and the impact of 2023 earthquake diplomacy on Turkish-Greek relations, but also the whole idea of that earthquake and how it changes the world, that part of the world. Thank you, Ilay. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I would like to start by thanking Petros Vanvakas and all others involved in these seminars, where I'm honored to participate this year for the first time. It's really a great venue. Many esteemed colleagues are here, some old acquaintances and some new faces. And I would like to thank Sotiris Roussos as well for this wonderful presentation. It will be hard to follow, but maybe I will be looking at a different dimension of the recent developments in the region, recent and sad developments in the region. For the last 2 weeks, there's an additional and the most tragic of reasons why the Eastern Mediterranean is so much in the news, which is the devastating earthquakes that hit the northwestern corner in Turkey and Syria, claiming tens of thousands of human lives, living beings, livelihoods, and the total destruction of physical and social structures in dozens of cities, towns, and villages. I've been following the developments with great sadness and frustration, like many others around the world, since the morning of February the 6th, and I would like to share my deepest condolences and extend my heartfelt wishes for a speedy recovery to everyone in the region, although it's going to be a difficult and long process. It is impossible to imagine the pain of those directly involved when the pain we feel from afar is so great, making it very difficult to concentrate on our daily tasks and to keep a calm disposition or an analytical stance to bring the earthquake into a framework of hope. But this is exactly what I'm going to try to do today. And hopefully maybe perhaps something slightly positive to be expected to come out of this most grim situation, and something that I will explore in the following. Can we expect the 2023 earthquakes to bring about a new momentum in Turkish foreign policy in general, and in particular in the realm of Turkish-Greek relations? The recent earthquakes were natural disasters, major tragedies of a historic scale that shook the global community worldwide. Help was received in the form of rescue teams, donations, and financial aid from even the most remote corners of the world. And when it came from neighboring countries, however, the appreciation had an extra something that was underlined by the press. For example, Armenian-Turkish border opened first time after 35 years to allow trucks to pass to the area. Israeli teams built mobile hospitals and effectively delivered aid to the victims. And Cyprus offered help, which was first rejected by the Turks and then allowed after lots of negotiations. These are all neighboring states who are also affected by the moves of the same fault lines tectonic lines, but this humanitarian sentiment was found to be worth being commented upon because Turkey has lately been having major political and diplomatic issues with all of them. Turkish military was directly involved in the Azerbaijan war over Karabakh against the Armenians. Relations with Israel had still not been fully normalized after the major fallout in the early 2000s. And Cyprus and Turkey are not even officially recognizing each other, let alone having any relations of any sort. But within this milieu of collaboration from near and far, one particular country's contributions evoked increased reaction from the public, and that is that of Greece. Now, Greece was one of the first countries that reached out to Turkey in the early morning hours of 6th of February, when the first earthquake took place. Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis called President Tayyip Erdogan and offered his condolences, and a little later, President Katerina Sakellaropoulou reiterated Greece's readiness to offer help in every way. And they kept their promise. Immediate release of professional search and rescue teams arrived in the area within days, removing dozens of people from under the rubble amid emotional scenes of them breaking down in tears, which made headline news. Upon departing, the team members were presented with tokens of gratitude by the officials, applauded at the airport and in the airplane by the public, and their statements were featured in newspapers and TV channels in both countries. When they returned, they were treated to dinners by the Turkish community living in Athens. Tons of material was gathered in the schools, markets, municipalities of Greece that were transported to the earthquake zone in trucks, cargo planes, and ships, which is still ongoing. Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Nikos Dendias was greeted upon his arrival at the airport by his counterpart, Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, who together surveyed the area from the air by helicopter and gave a common press conference giving warm messages of friendship, solidarity, and humanity. The campaign to collect donations for Turkey continues in full force everywhere in Greece right now. So far, so good, we may say. Over 70 countries sent in help from all around the world, and Greece is in the forefront of them. So why ask what that might mean for bilateral relations between Greece and Turkey specifically? Now, for two reasons. One, for what started happening 24 years ago, and two, for what has been happening lately in the last 2 years or so. Let's start with the end of last century. In August 17th, 1999, northwestern Turkey woke up at 3:16 a.m. to a very strong tremor in the power of 7.4, which caused destruction in the most populated areas in and around Istanbul. Greece sent in help and rescue teams then as well. National newspapers on both sides congratulated the cooperation with generous coverage. Less than a month later, on September 7th, a smaller but still very strong earthquake of 6 Richter struck the vicinity of Athens. Turkish search and rescue teams, which were already warmed up in the field, immediately ran to help their Greek neighbors in their relief efforts. So the fateful circle was therefore sealed, and the era that would henceforth be known as earthquake diplomacy that led to the Greek-Turkish rapprochement has thus begun. Now, could this be repeated today as well? This is the question in everybody's minds. Or is there a need for that? Well, that relates to the second part of the question, to what has been happening lately between Greece and Turkey. In fact, this is the very topic of my presentation today. And to summarize that, after having had bilateral relations that can best be described as problematic, Greece and Turkey entered a period of rapprochement following the 1999 earthquakes that ignited diplomatic momentum. This gave way to enhanced political, social, economic, and cultural relations for 2 decades, but started slowing down amid an environment of adversity over a number of unresolved issues. Whether the seemingly friendly atmosphere after the 2023 earthquake would give way to another round of improvement in Turkish-Greek relations remains to be seen, but it is a matter to be discussed with reference to comparison between the national and international conjectures of the two countries in 1999 and 23. Only then could one give a contextualized and meaningful answer to that question, and I'm trying to attempt this right now. Now, before getting, however, into the comparison of the two earthquake contexts, let me briefly comment on the basics of Greek-Turkish relations. Turkey and Greece are two countries that lie in ontological opposition to one another from the time of their respective state building, even though the two processes took place with a difference of 100 years. Greeks fought for independence from the Ottoman Empire in 1821, while the War of Liberation was concluded with a victory for Turkey in the Greco-Turkish War in Western Asia Minor in 1922. In their separate routes to forming a nation, Greece and Turkey formed their respective significant others, a matter that can still be traced in the form of stereotypical representations in popular culture and public discourses, which often find their way into polemical statements made by leading politicians. Mitsotakis yok, exclaimed Turkish President Erdogan in May 22, when stating that he will never deal with a Greek prime minister who's trying to prevent the US from selling warplanes to Turkey. A few months later, he raised or lowered the level to threats by saying, "Don't forget Izmir," referring to the Greco-Turkish War and the Smyrna fires of 1922 that Greeks know today as the Great Catastrophe. And later he quoted the lyrics of a famous song, "We may suddenly come over one night." Greece's response to this rhetoric was a call to putting an end to this type of bullying, which Prime Minister Mitsotakis uttered in Turkish, "Dayılık yok." This type of verbal exchange comes amid an environment of diplomatic standoff in the face of unresolved issues in bilateral relations, both old and new, including the air defense conundrum involving the S-type missiles from Russia and F-type fighter jets from the US, as well as disagreements over maritime sovereignty in the Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean. Following the longest-lasting showdown between Turkish and Greek warships on high alert in July-August 2020, the idea of restarting talks was just brought to the table, with both sides not being able to agree even on the agenda items to be discussed. The amicable exchanges in this context of the earthquake tragedy may thus be expected to shake the stubborn fault lines of the politicians on both sides. This expectation comes from the prior experience of the 99 earthquakes that remains vivid in people's minds. Yet despite the parallels and the cause and possible outcomes of the two cases of earthquake diplomacy, there are several significant differences at the domestic, bilateral, and the international levels. And let me go through these one by one. Greece in 99 was led by the Social Democrat PASOK government with Kostas Simitis as the prime minister. Bilateral relations were at their all-time low with the fresh memories of the 1996 Kardak-Emir crisis that brought Turkey and Greece to the brink of war over a small island in the Aegean. Earlier in 1999, the scandalous capture of the Kurdish PKK leader Öcalan at the Greek embassy in Kenya had given Greece a global embarrassment, while allowing Turkey to accuse its neighboring country of harboring terrorists. Following this fateful event, the Simitis government had a reshuffle that, very importantly for our purposes, brought Yorgos Papandreou to the seat of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. At the same time, Turkey had just held elections that made the democratic left Bülent Ecevit the prime minister of a coalition government, where most critically for our purposes, the Minister of Foreign Affairs was Ismail Cem. Now, Cem and Papandreou enjoyed a personal friendship and a shared vision of Turkish-Greek amity that they had already put in motion. And effectively utilizing the momentum that arose in the aftermath of twin earthquakes, the duo managed to turn disaster into opportunity. During the next decade, over 100 agreements were signed to forge cooperation in many fields, including tourism, economy, culture, technology, and environment, while civil initiatives were encouraged to strengthen intercultural bonds between the two societies. And the glass wall preventing the people of Greece and Turkey from visiting their neighbors had been lifted. Connections from the air, land, and sea were multiplied, along with the number of tourists from either side of the Aegean. And this was followed by exchange of students, academics, expats, professionals, workers, and spouses that started taking place, while joint projects in scholarly research, arts, and business became much more common than ever before. Confidence building measures ranged from joint naval maneuvers to the popularity of undubbed Turkish TV soaps in Greek households. Turkey was no longer the distant and negative other for Greeks, and vice versa. It became arguably more difficult to revert to negative stereotypes at the expense of an abstract image of the other, which instead found its concrete expression in actual people sharing similar lifestyles, worldviews, and cultural orientations. Discourses of coexistence and friendship replaced those of exclusion and enmity to a great extent, which remained dominant despite changing governments, leaders, and crises, both in Greece and Turkey, until recently. So what is different between now and then? Domestically, both countries find themselves a few short months away from critical general elections, neither of which promise absolute certainty. And that is the end of parallels, I'm afraid, as there are more divergences in this comparison. First, economically, Greece just came out of a major financial crisis after repaying a huge amount of public debt and seems now to be on a rather stable ground. Turkey, on the other hand, is struggling with a very high inflation that keeps rising and a very low value of its currency that keeps falling. Public debt is very high, yet the interest rates are very low, artificially low due to these Islamic conservative views of Erdogan and the economic policies of his ruling party. At the international level, Greece is somewhat in a rather safe place, aligned with the course of its EU and NATO membership, having no major issues to deal with except for its disagreements with Turkey. But we cannot say the same for the foreign policy direction of Turkey, which is, to put it mildly, distressed at the moment. During the first phase of AKP rule, Turkey pledged to follow a zero problems with its neighbors policy in the region, but now this fantasy is far from resembling reality. In addition to having various conflicts with individual countries, Turkey currently is regarded as a troubled member in most international organizations. In NATO, Turkey is not joining most decisions taken in protest of Russia's war on Ukraine, such as sanctions, nor does it support the candidacy of Finland and Sweden yet. In the European Court of Human Rights, also, Turkey holds the biggest pile of folders, full not only with court cases, but also unimplemented decisions and warnings, such as the case of unjustified imprisonment of journalists, intellectuals, or artists like Çiğdem Mater, philanthropists like Osman Kavala, and opposition politicians such as Selahattin Demirtas. Alongside these two non-parallel positions of Greece and Turkey in the realms of economy and domestic and foreign policy, there is another point that needs to be stressed further in terms of disjunctures between the two countries in the comparative context of the 1999 and 2023 earthquakes. And this concerns the expectations from one another in the pursuit of political interests, or in terms of alignments in longer-term goals. In 1999, Turkey had but two clear prospects in its foreign policy: seeking EU candidacy and solving the Cyprus issue. Greece was a key country in the way of Turkey in pursuing these two paths. After the earthquake, these two became the carrots that motivated continuation of diplomatic relations with a purpose. And eventually, Greece paved the way by lifting its veto in front of Turkish membership to the EU in Helsinki in December 1999, only a few months after the earthquakes, and by playing an effective role in the UN-led negotiations about Cyprus. In that regard, the earthquake diplomacy can be considered to be successful. Despite the show of goodwill, however, these processes did not yield any further results in ultimately reaching their aim. So in that regard, earthquake diplomacy was limited. Today, we have a different situation that may affect the answer to the question if earthquake diplomacy of 2023 will remain limited or become successful. It is hard to assess because, unlike the initial direction followed in the very beginning of AKP rule, the path to EU membership is no longer pursued as a realizable policy objective for Erdogan. It is not even an agenda item anymore. Neither is any resolution in Cyprus in sight, nor does Turkey seem to seek settling down its disputes with any country or within an international organization, at least not effectively. So one could suspect, if there is, perhaps a deliberate ambiguity of direction. Without any clear purpose in sight, a chaotic ambivalence in foreign policy looks like being a more desirable situation for Erdogan, who is by now well experienced in creating opportunities out of crises. If this indeed is his chosen route, there is the possibility of the earthquake not bringing in a real diplomatic opening. Rather than working towards an alliance with dubious benefits, Erdogan might prefer to continue a manipulable standoff with Greece. This may make it easier for him to turn the situation to a more much needed electoral gain in his own account. We're already seeing small signs, such as the sighting of PD Ray submarine near Lesbos and close flights of Turkish fighter jets just last week. And those signs might suggest that no major U-turn is signaled thus far. Alternate Foreign Minister Varvitsiotis said yesterday that they are not complacent about Greek-Turkish relations and warned that a continuation of the aggressive, provocative tone would make things irreparable. It would surely be naive to think that the earthquake would act like a miracle and automatically untie all Gordian's knots. Having said that, and on a positive note, there is still much room for hope that bilateral relations may enter a new phase that can bring about a renewed impetus for finding mutual understanding and will for creatively addressing common problems. Foreign Minister Dendia said yesterday that the climate was excellent, that he believed that unified approaches to extremely difficult issues could be built. Before he became a politician, Turkish Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu said that he sent a letter to the Time magazine in 1999 stating that it was important to help one another in times of need, but that Greece and Turkey did not need another earthquake or disaster in order to improve their bilateral relations. He's now in a position to prove this to be true. Back in 1999, it was not the earthquake that gave way to the rapprochement, but the will of the political leaders to turn it into such a moment. Today, this may or may not be the case again. But either way, if a new rapprochement became possible, this would not be because the political leadership connected to each other at the personal level or shared the same vision, like Papandreou and Cem did. It is unlikely to have it repeated once more. What is more likely to happen is that such a connection will be forged at the level of the general public and the civil societies of Turkey and Greece, whose amicable links are at a much more advanced degree than they were 24 years ago. When asked to comment on the possibility of forging another round of earthquake diplomacy, Yorgos Papandreou himself said today, we're operating from an entirely different standing point. The aftermath of the earthquake showed that the people of Turkey are no longer in a position to look up to the state or to the military to rescue them. They are to get organized to take care of themselves. Beyond being employed only in survival mode, this solidarity and consciousness at the societal level could easily be translated into cross-cultural and international dimensions. So one could conclude on an optimistic point regarding the outcomes of the earthquakes. If the politicians ever fail to follow up on the promise of earthquake diplomacy, it would well be the task taken on by civic initiatives on both sides to establish a powerful platform that demands reconciliation of differences and a reintroduction of rapprochement between Turkey and Greece. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you both for a very thorough kind of a presentation on each side of and finishing us up this week. And I have a couple of questions for you, and I urge people who are on to also like raise questions and put them in the chat or raise your hand or the Q&A. but I think both of you sort of like address a similar perspective from something completely different. But it's to me, it speaks to the same thing, and it speaks to the whole idea of viability of governance and the ability of, like, so whether we're talking about this recurrent nationalism or resurgent nationalism, it becomes almost like this ploy or this bonding mechanism of, like, connecting the population with the governing mechanisms. So whether we're talking about a subject or a citizen, I think that's where we are in different modes. So, like, as Sotiris mentions his revolutions, he gives us a very nice historical perspective of this different revolutions and how they evolve over the last 100 years, and they almost parallel this modernization theory of sorts. And then, to the point of, like, not being able to deliver an authoritarian regimes, and then you have, like, this sort of, like, the breakup of, like, this sort of like boiling over of society in some way or another, to the point of, like, moving us forward to some kind of a different stage. And you could say the Arab world, or Turkey or Greece, are at different stages of this process. And the whole, the the latest Greek Republic, in its, almost like in its 50-year process, is the longest, the longest standing sort of like a republic in modern Greek history. So maybe Greece, with the 100 years ahead of the Turkish structure, has more of a head start in all of this than everybody else. And of course, European Union membership and everything else, the last 40 plus years has also helped. But my question to both of you has to do with, the prospects of this process, whether it's this revolutionary process that we're seeing in the Arab world or in Iran, or the process of moving forward as far as governance is concerned in Turkey. That despite the pronouncements that the easiness by which nationalism can, like, rah rah will come at night, will come in the day, whatever the poem or the song that there is reference to, the process is an inevitable process of moving from subject to citizen, and even deepening that citizenship idea. So, first maybe to Sotiri, like, what he sees in the Arab world and in Iran per se, and then maybe, not only in Turkey, but in Greece as well, and I think that the outside, there's this, like, international relations frictions are also determined by the inside as well, so how those two things play against one another. So, Sotiri.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. I would say that what we can observe here is people or our societies taking distances from what we have seen as nationalism, as modern nationalism, as we know it in the 70s and the 80s and the 60s, at least in the Arab world. We have two new, let's say, platforms that we have seen in engaging the society. The first platform is the platform of what they call dignity. And it's a very, very important platform. It's a platform of dignity, karama, as they call it in Arabic. And this is a mixture of economic and socio-political expectations which are related to social justice, but also social movement, and at the same time, political expression. This is the one platform. The second platform, which is not a new platform, is the platform of relationship with a religion or religious ideologies. And this is a platform that we have seen in many places, including places that we did not expect to see in the 80s or 90s. And then I mean Israel, for example. We have the resurgence of what we call religious nationalism in Israel. So these are the two platforms that are new in engaging the society, and these platforms has to do with the relationship between the state and the society. And I suppose that it has also to do with what we see in Turkey or in other places in Syria now with the earthquake. I see this platform, particularly the first platform of dignity, as I call it, is a very important platform. And in that sense, indirectly, we can uh, uh, connect it with what is happening in the relations between the two countries. I mean, what the people ask, or not all the people, but very dynamic strata of the society, they ask for this kind of social justice in the sense of fulfilling expectation. It is very important. It's not the first time that we have revolutionary or at least revolting movements because of not of no fulfillment of their expectations. It's very common, but now this platform is very, very important in all the Middle East. And the other platform is a platform of political Islam, of religion. I wouldn't say only political Islam, of religion in the region. And we have to follow these two platforms. We have seen that in Lebanon, for example, 2 years ago, with all these young people who revolted against not only against all the political establishments across parties, from Hezbollah to the Lebanese forces of the Christians or the Sunnah. It's a very, very important platform.
Yeah. Ilay?
Thank you. But it's a good question, and I also like to like the point that Sotiris made when he drew these parallels between earthquakes and revolutions, how they're in a way releasing the energy from under the ground in concentrating in one point, in a way focusing on a particular issue, but actually there's so much more underneath that shakes the foundations of whatever is above. So and it's very interesting to think like this. So I'd like to think aloud a little bit more. I did look at the Gezi movements in 2013 that took place in starting in Istanbul. It reached the whole of Turkey, but also a bit more global generation, kind of combining itself in a way with the Occupy movement in the US or alter globalization movements in Southern Europe, as well as, so the questions about to what extent we can compare and contrast and put them together with Arab Spring or Arab revolutions as well. Whether that is the question, that remains a question that I don't want to get into, but there is something common in this sense of releasing that energy, shaking the ground, shaking the foundation of the state, the city-state relations. But you know what you've also talked about, the viability of the governance, how people are seeking new democratic openings to address some of the issues that they're facing in a more creative way, and thereby turning things around, literally. And disasters like earthquakes have that potential of releasing that form of energy that is a constructive event. It's a generating event. So in that sense, it's very important to think about them like that. In the case of Turkey now, because we're talking about the Turkish earthquake at the moment, what happened in Gezi was that, you know, the earthquake was one way of releasing that energy, but making people realize that there is civil society initiatives that are alternatives to the subject, the citizen expecting state involvement or state care, and they had to take things in their hands to get by and to design a society they would like to live in, that is different than the vision of the governing party at that point. But and one could say that, you know, Gezi was the ultimate escalation of that civil society initiative, where, you know, ideologically diverse groups came together towards that aim. It is said that this did not generate the kind of political turnaround, and instead was, in a way, it worked towards the contrary, inviting more state pressure and more authoritarian view of the state coming in, and crashing many people, many parties, organizations involved in these Gezi uprising. Many of them are jailed at the moment, or they had to leave the country, or have been pacified in politics. So now with this earthquake, we see this being released. Another call for this kind of citizenship, this kind of search for a revolutionary moment in the whole composition of state-society relations that would give us a more viable new form of governance, perhaps, that is not only one call towards the new general elections, but also a bit of a new climate changing, rather revolutionary possibility that really came to people's minds.
Yeah, and I don't know if there are questions out there, but I mean, I think it's, you can raise it, but I think it's like, it goes back to, I'm just going to be a little bit more provocative and push the envelope a little bit with both of you. So like, it's a matter of like, and we heard this week, is it about, an American, we have this American mindset that, that's really played out in, the Cairo speech that Obama gives in 2009, that everybody goes back to it and goes, okay, democracy, universal value of democracy. And then for the most part, people are willing to go along with it, as long as it also, democracy gives you the viability, because as a result of that, we have Libya and Syria in the way that they are. We have Yemen the way that it is. And not just, the fact that you're not able to deliver on the viability. People still can't buy a kilo of tomatoes, regardless of how democratic the structure is. And then no matter how authoritarian the structure is, if your buildings collapse like a house of cards and you have no foundation, then, it's an issue of effectiveness. People don't necessarily care about the democratic values per se, although that would be great. I'm for democracy. That's not my point. But you also have Tunisia, right? You have Tunisia, and you have like somebody who's like, people are willing to give somebody like a chance and go, you know what, throw out the constitution, we'll live under this structure. So is it an issue of like this interest versus values? And is it an issue of like, viability versus values? Is it an issue of like, I want things to get done. I want to have a job. I want to live in a house that doesn't collapse on me. And I want to, bottom line, buy a kilo of tomatoes. And that's the most revolutionary kind of a statement that you can have in societies that are maybe on the periphery of a global economic structure and a political remaking at the same time. Right?
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Danis.
Super aura and expectation, and thank you very much to both of you. It's enlightening, your whole comments and historical perspective and what's happening, the landscape in our world, and especially in the area of the Middle East and Mediterranean Middle East, and now we have the Russian Balkans and so it's very interesting. It creates a sort of a storm, a perfect storm, because of human behavior and expectation and competitiveness, ideology. It's just that, so it goes back to the point that what Professor and I have been talking for a long period of time is citizenship and democracy, to elect the appropriate visionary leaders that they really will bring the people together. You can see how the Greek government and the population, the people who went to Turkey, because now they show that they can do some good, they can help their human beings. And it goes on and on. Of course, the Turkish government, it was appreciative and lower the temperature for a while. So they're looking for help, and human behavior and humanity is looking to help each other. So I think we have somehow, because democracy has been now in an auction block, and it's been purchased by big conglomerate, big money blocks and individuals. So there is no longer democracy and citizenship in the coordination and integration of being able to work a global economy that everybody's looking for a home that wouldn't fall down, a home that would not collapse in an earthquake, even though it was a big one, or a pound of kilo of tomatoes or potatoes or whatever they enjoy. And so you have the leadership in and the part that it always puzzles me, but also, is there a solution to when you have government that the United States, the Europeans are feeding armaments to a country, and the other side is continuously bombarding and leveling the country that has been now in a last 12 months. How do we bring that together? How do we convince the leadership and the most educated people to select the appropriate leader? That's one of the things that always puzzles me, and I always think that there is a solution if we wanted to. And if you have not, if you read the, I think there was the Kennedy era with the Cuba crisis, missile Cuba crisis, and Khrushchev, they were able to resolve that, ready to start a third world war by the diplomacy that they were going back and forth. And it just puzzled me that we have forgotten that some good historical solutions that we have been going through. Can somebody enlighten me on this?
I think we need another seminar to do this. But I think, I think it's the same question that I posed. Like it's the same kind of a thing. Like, how do we move forward, and maybe we shift the expectations and maybe move away from just being enamored with democracy without content. Because it's at the end of the day, it has to be delivering to people the real goods, if you wish.
Well, if I may say something, it's the very good example is Tunisia. Tunisia started as a success story of democracy. They didn't have the same problems with, of course, they have their Islamist party, Nahda, who took the majority of the first elections, but not the absolute majority. They didn't have the whole control of the government as it was the case in Egypt with Morsi. And we all hope that Tunisia would be a kind of exactly example of people in the Middle East, that they vote for the right people. And that would go okay, despite the problems. But it didn't. It didn't. And for a couple of reasons, which are, as I said, in the platform of dignity. People vote, but they didn't get their expectations fulfilled. What were the expectations? The expectation is to climb up the ladder in the society, in the economy, to have the right to climb up the ladder if they work hard, or if they are educated, if they have credentials to do so. This is one, because they said that we have the credentials, we are young people, educated, hungry for work, and we are not allowed to change our life and to actually improve our life. And this is one. The second is that they feel that the new political elite, the new political personnel, follow the same lines and the same, let's say, attitude as the previous one. I mean, in the case that although the Islamists came with a slogan of changing everything, changing the status of the state, and the sulta, as they call it, the power. They didn't so. They didn't do so. On the contrary, they follow the same attitudes as they have seen in the Ben Ali period. So this actually discouraged young people, discouraged them from going and vote. So we have less and less people going to the ballot box. And not only that, it is very important to note that only a very small fraction, about less than 10% of the people up to 30 years old went to vote in the elections. Very, very few young people.
Yeah.
And not only that, we had the biggest number of foreign fighters to ISIS from all other countries. If you compare with the population of the or one of the highest, going and to fight for ISIS, comparing, of course, with the population of the country. So why is that? Because the platform of dignity did not go well. They had no. They have the voting right, but the voting right is not. They have, of course, multi-party system. A lot of parties, left-wing parties, right-wing parties, Islamist parties, secular parties, everything. But they have not fulfilled what they call the claims, the demands of the dignity. And then it is, of course, now the society is against the new president, who is actually it's now an authoritarian regime. But at the beginning, they said, okay, let's have somebody, even with authoritarian powers, to fix the situation, to fix the situation here. And this is where we are. And I'm talking about Tunisia because it was seen by myself as well, I mean, as a rosy, let's say, example of what was happening in the Arab Spring. That's why I'm saying that the Arab Spring is an ongoing process. We have not seen the end game yet.
Yeah,
The only thing.
Let's listen to Professor Ors, and then we can go back.
Sure.
Just I want to be a good host.
Yeah, thank you. Just briefly, I mean, it's a very fundamental question. Of course, it has to be asked. Safety and economy, when people are hungry, when people fear for their lives, how can we talk about, democracy and justice and those notions? And it's true. And there are two realms that I can relate to this. One is the earthquake, the other one is revolution, just because we came to that comparison there. When Gezi happened, and it started out by trying to prevent a project of building in the middle of Istanbul's very prominent park, Gezi Park. And people protested for environmental reason, but also for their urban ideas. And then in terms of how their city should look like, and that became a much bigger issue. But it was talked about, what's the point? And this is not really what we should be talking about. A few trees in the words of Erdogan, just a few trees. But the response to this was actually quoting Lefebvre's idea of right to the city, which, David Harvey, for example, says it's the most fundamental of human rights. In a way, in the right to the city is one that gives us the right to shape our lives the way we wish. And this is something that generates new understanding of how the society wishes to be governed, whose right is it is to take those decisions. To bring it to the earthquakes, a similar thing. When people are in a survival mode, they're under the rubble and have lost their family members and their whole community in some cases. Of course, they would not be thinking about democracy and so on. But it's also very human demand to ask from their government to take human lives, human safety as their first priority, rather than getting into this dueling notion with with others, with security and those kinds of ideas that are being talked about all the time. So put human lives first. When it comes to Greece, for example, in Greece, they don't want to see a warring, the nation that, they would visit one night, all of a sudden, these phrases. In Greece, they want to see a helping partner where they can collaborate, have disaster preparedness, the very, very human things that make life much more bearable. So therefore, a democracy, a justice demand would be one to shape governmental policies as to what kind of neighbors do we want, what kind of cooperation we want with them, and what kind of diplomacy we can push for, which comes down at the end of the day to the very basic fundamental human needs regarding safety and economy. Spend that money you're spending on F-16s to building safer houses, to fight forest fires and environment, and those kinds of common problems that we humans are facing in this part of the world. So I think it's a good question that connects back to its answer in a way, and answers it that way. So thank you.
Knowing Mr. Danis, I'm sure he has a follow-up. And we have like a few minutes, so I'm gonna yield the floor, and then we'll wrap it up.
Professor Makas, thank you very much. This is again a very enlightening conversation, which is very important. And I'm always looking for solutions. And obviously, the leaders that we have, the choices, and Professor Roussos pointed out that people don't go and vote. Yes, and that's a phenomenon of who they vote, who can they vote, what are the choices. In the country that I live now, I was born in Greece and I always follow somewhat, but in this country, the last election, we had a two-party system here, and obviously there are two candidates, both which really they are somewhat, the previous administration was totally incompetent, and the new administration has somewhat followed the same point that Mr. Roussos pointed out, that they follow the earlier ones and most of the issues and policies and what have you. And so the choices. So how do we fix that? What can the citizens? And we keep talking about, and every political leader, democracy, and they really were not following anything. Democracy is like in the United States, is every citizen is equal. But everybody talks about it, but nobody practices or believes it. So how do we eliminate, or how do we produce better candidates that they have a real authentic and very mindset of fixing things and leveling the playing field and working for the planet rather than individual parties and ideologies?
Lots of things there to bring together, and I think as I've said before in other panels this week, and I'm very, very grateful for everybody's participation. I think a good seminar and a good panel is when we have more questions leaving than when we're coming in, because we all become students and we all become sort of like open to the new ideas that we hear. And I think this panel today, almost like wrapping up the seminar this week, does just that, in the fact that you've taken two scholars that have completely different or somewhat different trajectories, and you see the overlapping in where it's coming to, as far as this notion of a constant revisionism. And that revisionism could be a good thing if we're talking about moving towards democratic structures. A revisionism could be a deadly thing when we're talking about actually changing geopolitical borders. So that the big debate for all of us is, how do we measure out the external and the domestic structure, and to what extent the external also conditions the domestic moving forward, whether nationalism becomes a convenient glue to modernization, or we have other identities, as Professor Ors just brought up, our human identity and the humanity that ties us together. And beyond the politics, I think it's that drive for humanity that sort of like, lends a helping hand, whether it's the migration, a humanitarian crisis, or the horrific situation in Syria and in Turkey, or the economic crisis that really lets young people in North Africa set themselves on fire over a kilo of tomatoes or a zucchini, or the tolerance of people to give in, like as Professor Roussos just brought up, the whole notion of like, yes, I'll take authoritarianism, and I will even take a beating every now and then, make my house safe, or make my school productive, give me a chance in the global structure that we're in. So I want to thank all of you. I want to thank Mr. Danis for, supporting us throughout this.